It was one of those nights where silence felt heavier than words. Nicole Kidman sat alone in her dimly lit living room, staring at an old photo. One where she and Keith Urban were smiling like nothing could ever go wrong. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling just slightly. For years, she had stayed quiet, letting people assume her life was perfect, that her marriage was unbreakable. But now, at 57, Nicole was done pretending. The truth had been clawing at her heart for far too long, and she was finally ready to let the world know what really happened behind closed doors. Everyone saw Nicole and Keith as the perfect couple, the golden pair of Hollywood. She was elegance and grace, and he was charm and warmth. Together, they looked like a dream. They walked every red carpet hand in hand, whispering to each other, smiling as flashbulbs went off. But what no one saw was the cracks slowly forming beneath that picture-perfect surface. Nicole had always been the one holding things together, the one who believed love could fix anything. And for a while it did. But over time, something began to change. Keith wasn't the same. The man who used to serenade her with gentle songs and small surprises started staying out later, traveling longer, and smiling less when he came home. Nicole noticed it, of course. She noticed everything. The way his phone was always face down, the sudden texts that made him walk out of the room, the hesitation in his eyes when she asked simple questions. She wanted to believe it was stress, maybe just a rough patch, but deep down, her gut was whispering what her heart refused to hear. There were nights when Nicole would wait up for him, pretending to read a script, though she couldn't focus on a single line. When the door would finally open, Keith would walk in smelling of perfume that wasn't hers, faint but distinct, like something lingering from a hug that lasted too long. She wouldn't say a word. She'd smile, ask how his day went, and he'd mumble something about the studio or meetings. Then he'd go upstairs, leaving her to sit there in the quiet, trying to convince herself she was imagining it. One night, though, it became impossible to ignore. Nicole had been invited to a private event, one she wasn't supposed to attend because Keith said he'd be away recording. But something pushed her to go. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was hope that she was wrong. She slipped into the room quietly, her heart pounding, her eyes scanning the crowd. And then she saw him. Keith Urban, standing in the corner, laughing, holding a glass of wine, and beside him was someone she didn't recognize. A young woman, her hand lightly resting on his chest, whispering something that made him smile the way he hadn't smiled at Nicole in months. For a moment, Nicole froze. The music blurred, the laughter faded, and it felt like the air was sucked out of the room. She didn't confront him, not then. She simply turned and walked out, her heels echoing down the hallway like small cracks in her heart. When Keith came home that night, she didn't ask anything. She didn't need to. The silence between them was loud enough to say everything. Days passed, then weeks. Nicole threw herself into work, into scripts, rehearsals, interviews. But no matter how hard she tried to bury the pain, it always surfaced. During one interview, a reporter asked about Keith, and Nicole smiled that soft Hollywood smile, the kind that hides 1,000 tears. She said, marriage takes patience. It takes forgiveness. But what she didn't say was how forgiveness had become her full-time job. Then came the night everything finally fell apart. Keith came home late, again. But this time, Nicole was waiting for him, standing by the piano. "Who is she?" she asked softly, her voice trembling but calm. Keith froze, the look in his eyes giving her all the answers before he even spoke. "Nick, it's not what you think," he said, trying to reach for her hand. But she pulled away. "Then tell me what it is," she whispered. The silence that followed was worse than any confession. It was confirmation. Tears welled in her eyes as she walked away from him. Keith tried to stop her, saying her name over and over, but she didn't look back. That night, she packed a small bag and left the house quietly. No drama, no shouting, just the sound of heartbreak echoing through the halls of what used to be their home. In the days that followed, the world started speculating. The tabloids went wild. Nicole and Keith split? Trouble in paradise? But neither of them said a word. Nicole stayed silent, trying to heal, while Keith buried himself in work. Friends said he seemed lost, that he was drinking more, that the studio sessions were shorter and sadder. But Nicole, she was trying to find herself again. Then came the betrayal she hadn't seen coming. A rumor surfaced online, whispers about a DNA test that connected Keith to another woman. Nicole saw it late at night, scrolling through social media. Her heart dropped as she saw headlines suggesting Keith might have fathered a child outside their marriage. She wanted to deny it, to close the phone and pretend it wasn't real. But when the reports kept multiplying, she realized the truth had finally clawed its way out. The story broke open like wildfire, spreading across every social platform within minutes. The internet exploded with opinions, photos, and wild speculation. Everyone had something to say. Some defended Keith, insisting it was nothing but gossip, the price of fame. Others claimed they had proof, screenshots, messages, whispers from people who said they knew the truth. The story took a life of its own, twisting reality into whatever the audience wanted to believe. Through it all, Nicole stayed silent. No interviews, no statements, just silence. But her quiet wasn't peace, it was pain. Behind the scenes, she was breaking. She felt humiliated, betrayed, and completely exposed. For years, she had stood by Keith, protected him from rumors, believed in him when no one else did. She had loved him through his darkest moments, through every mistake and every second chance, and now, it felt like none of it had mattered. Watching her name trend beside his was like seeing her entire life unravel in real time. Every comment cut deep, every rumor another wound she couldn't stop. But still, she said nothing. Because sometimes silence isn't surrender. It's the only way to survive when the world refuses to listen. One of Nicole's closest friends later revealed that she had broken down during a dinner, whispering, "He promised me I was enough." That single line spread online, breaking hearts everywhere. Fans flooded social media, defending her, calling her strength inspiring. But Nicole wasn't looking for sympathy. She was just trying to breathe again. Weeks later, Keith finally addressed the rumors. Standing on stage during a concert, his voice cracked as he said, "Sometimes love isn't enough, and sometimes you hurt the one person who loved you the most." The crowd fell silent. Some thought it was his way of apologizing. Others saw it as guilt. Nicole watched the clip, her eyes glassy, whispering to herself, "He finally said something." But it didn't heal the wound. Months passed before Nicole finally spoke. Sitting across from an interviewer, she looked composed but fragile. "I kept quiet for a long time," she said softly. But there comes a moment where silence becomes its own kind of lie. When the interviewer asked what she meant, Nicole paused for a long time. Then she said, "You can't keep pretending forever. I tried to protect him. I tried to protect us. But there were things I couldn't ignore anymore." Her voice broke slightly as she continued. "People think betrayal is only about cheating, but it's also about losing trust, losing connection, losing the feeling that you matter." Those words hit millions. Social media exploded again, but this time fans weren't just gossiping, they were empathizing. Nicole had spoken not just as a celebrity, but as a woman who had loved too deeply, too long. Keith reportedly tried reaching out after that interview. A source close to him said he left her a letter, pages of apologies, regrets, and the words, "I'll never stop loving you." But by then, Nicole had moved past needing closure. She had already given too much of her heart. In the months that followed, she found peace in the simplest things, spending time with her daughters, traveling quietly, staying out of the spotlight. She began smiling again, not the red carpet smile, but the real one. Friends said she looked lighter, freer, like a woman who had finally put down a burden she carried for too long. When Nicole made her first public appearance after everything, she wore a bold red dress, elegant, powerful, and unapologetic. Cameras flashed, fans cheered, and headlines called it her revenge dress. But Nicole didn't see it that way. For her, it wasn't revenge, it was rebirth. It was her way of saying, "I'm still here, and I'm okay." In a recent quiet moment during a charity event, someone asked her if she'd ever forgive Keith. She smiled gently and said, "Forgiveness isn't for them. It's for you. I've already forgiven him. I just haven't forgotten." And maybe that's what makes Nicole Kidman's story so powerful. Not the heartbreak, not the betrayal, but the grace that came after. She didn't let bitterness define her. She turned pain into strength, silence into truth, and heartbreak into healing. Now, as she steps into this new chapter of her life at 57, Nicole seems more grounded than ever. The world sees her as radiant, resilient, and free. And maybe, just maybe, that's the kind of revenge that hurts the most. Not screaming or exposing someone, but simply smiling, moving forward, and living beautifully without them. Because sometimes the loudest way to say you broke me is to show them that you healed anyway.